Welcome to Agency Acquisitions and Exits. I'm your host, Peter Lang. Today's guest is James Kwon, founder of Figmints and creator of Slices, a performance-based financial framework, changing how agencies and his agency structured teams, budgets, and then used it for acquisitions. It is the tool for coming up with performance-based deal structures. So in this episode, James shares how a conversation with his team a few years ago pushed him to stop saying yes to every client and sparked the invention of this new operating model, taking the things that existed from some of the best in the business, Jack Stack, great game of business, profit first, and reshaped how Figmints hires, incentivizes, and acquires. We get into how Slices works so you can understand and use it yourself, why it helps them make smarter decisions, how it could potentially be the new ESOP model of the future, and how James used it to structure his acquisitions. And if you're interested in creating more transparency, more fairness and flexibility inside your agency, or just want to understand how to diligence the component parts of a company without taking massive risk, this episode you don't want to miss. So let's dive in. James, thank you for joining me.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, Pete.
This has been a long time in the making. We've known each other for a while now. So I'm going to make sure the questions I ask you are probing and uncomfortable. But besides the things I'm going to ask you, since everyone else may not know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and the background of the agency life and what you got going on.
Sure. So I fell into the agency world working at big agencies, mostly here in Boston. Got to cut my teeth as the employee number 5 at CBS.com. I like to call myself. Back then, there was only 5 of us on the .com team, and got to work on a website that has almost 1 million people per hour or something like that. Worked on portal systems for United Healthcare, Optum Health, Deutsche Bank, Mini Cooper, Virgin Mobile, Puma, name drop, and lots of fun big agencies in Boston. Broke away, started my own agency almost 15 years ago now. Started Figmints as mostly a branding web firm, but we really picked up marketing and strategy. I became a HubSpot partner, and now we're about 20 people and have been based here in New England until about COVID. Now we're distributed around the world. So about half to 2/3 of us are in Latin America and Central America. And it's been a wild ride. I feel blessed to have been at the helm leading this amazing team. And yeah, our mission is to help people thrive. The company we're with, clients we serve, community that we're in. And yeah, the fact that I feel like I'm living in my calling has been just real blessing for me and my family.
And you're doing stuff other than just agency life.
Yeah. So the fun stuff of agency, and many entrepreneurs you probably talk to, I didn't start the business going into it thinking that I'm going to start this amazing business. It's going to be so great. I fell into it because I had some clients on the side and that grew, and I thought, yeah, I could make a little bit more money doing this. And so I broke off and did that full time. And as I started to dive into it, I really started to fall in love with the game of business itself. I love the competitiveness. I love the systems, the structure. I have a whole row of traction books behind me. I'm a EOS Kool-Aid drinker. And so I love that aspect of it. Your course, Peter, has been so helpful for me to think about acquisitions as a growth strategy, as a path to growing the business exponentially. So yeah, I really fallen in love with the business, and so that has become my platform, my canvas for inventing new things, new systems, a different way to think about how agencies can deliver services and how we can operate efficiently.
So when did you start to realize you needed a different model than what you were seeing in the marketplace? Because you're a student of the game. You're obsessed with it, you're a player in it, but you've been studying the people who've built these frameworks and these things that help accelerate your development. When did that shift of going, there's a way that I think it could be done that's taking from inspiration of others, but better for us and potentially better for other people?
Yeah, when the old model was falling apart and not working, is we absolutely needed a better system. And so this is maybe 5 to 10 years ago. I knew that time and materials wasn't going to work. I think a lot of agencies that I talk to these days, they are moving away from the time and materials way, and they are moving towards more of a value based model. But that's great on the pricing side, but it starts to fall apart when you have a modern employee, a modern staff that's looking for flexible work hours. They're constantly looking to have their compensation match their economy, which is sometimes difficult as a business owner. And so we needed a system that felt objective, clear. It felt like it was a game that people can win. And so kind of invented our own system. And also, I invented this system based on some principles that I've learned in Profit First, Michael McCall's awesome book, as well as Dave Ramsey's envelope budgeting philosophies. So we call the system slices, and that's kind of the program that I think, Peter, when I mentioned to you, you're like, "This is awesome. Can we share this?" At the time, I was like, "No, this is secret for now," and we're just starting the the forefront, the adventure into stepping out into trying to leverage this as a program that I think is helpful for agencies that are looking to do acquisitions. It's helpful for agencies, period. So this is fun getting to talk about this more.
It's one of the most challenging things for entrepreneurs, which is measuring. Now you're also a spreadsheet nerd.
I am. I love spreadsheets. They're beautiful. They're a beautiful thing. I like to analyze everything, from the items and artifacts that I like to buy, and hotels that have my assistant do some analysis and put it on a spreadsheet. Let me, sort these by uh, the qualities that I want to see it move through. So yeah, I love spreadsheets.
And when we were prepping, you have told me that slices started kind of simplistically as a financial concept,
Right.
but it became more people and more of an empowerment tool as it started to progress. So how did it evolve?
Yeah, that's right. So when it started, we were looking for a platform that one would give us more profitability at the end of the day. In our old model, and this may be true for most agencies out there, they sell the work, their heads down, they try to do good work, they cross their fingers, they hope that they have profit at the end of the day. That is not a good model. So Michael McCall's, I think, is the profit first model is great. Hey, declare a percentage for yourself, save it aside. In fact, put it in a separate account and try not to touch it. Operate within the margin that you have, or the means that you have. And so another kind of highlight of doing slices when we set out on a profit first model was, oh, hey, guess what? I can pay myself this way too. And so the real genesis of it was my team actually said, James, we don't want to do small projects anymore. We're going to say no to anything that's less than X dollar figure. And I think that was 15K at the time or something like that. We're like, okay, well, I don't like that. I hate that. In fact, as a someone who's passionate about helping small businesses, and turning away people who have wave money in my face and say, hey, would you take this and help me out. I started saying no for about 3 months, and I couldn't take it anymore. It made my stomach sick. So I started saying yes to those folks and not involving my team. I just created a separate team to say yes to them. And I said, well, this is kind of an experiment, to say yes to these smaller projects. So let me just kind of come up with a whole different system of how to do it. Kind of invented slices on the fly. We said, okay, we're going to do this profit first. In fact, I'm going to pay myself. I had never traditionally paid myself from projects like this. I would pay myself as a profit share and maybe a salary piece. But I said, okay, well, if we're going to get that, I'm going to pay myself the sales commission on projects like this. I'm going to pay myself for doing the strategy and maybe some of the account management. But we have these kind of pieces of the project that can go towards fulfillment, getting the work done. We're going to reserve some for operations and some of the tools that we may need in the future. And Slices was born, and that has opened my eyes to so many other factors, more than just the financial management piece. Like you said, it's really enriched the lives of the people working on the projects. And of course it does, because this is naturally a pay for performance model. The people who love the work can do it rapidly and well. They're going to be rewarded handsomely for being able to do more work. And so they can work as much as they want. They can take as much time off as they want. They can kind of control their own schedule because it's a very unit economic, very a system that is tied to the actual outcomes of what needs to get done.
The efficiency and effectiveness requires measurement. And so I would assume to slice things up, you're measuring. What does, the measurement breakdown look like? Like for an agency owner who's listening, what is a slice?
Yeah.
And how did you determine what a slice is versus different aspects of the project that other people call creativity or whatnot?
Yeah, if we had a spreadsheet in front of us, I could walk through it, but I'll try to make it as simple as possible. So if people are listening along here, they can kind of follow along. But the slices that we've determined are associated to the different categories that make the whole process work. Sales and marketing, one. The next is, we call it management, account management and strategy. The next is fulfillment, so getting the work done, the production of the work. And then operations and profit. So that is the simplest version of it. But if you go deeper, you can create slices for yourself. You can have an owner slice built into the gross margin if you wanted to. You can have carve out the profits even more into team bonuses and department bonuses. We have something we call, in the Figmints model, we call it a mothership slice. So our mothership is our back office. And so we take a percentage of all of our business units gross profit. And so that has a little bit of back office admin versus back office and overarching support and profit baked into that as well. So we carve it out very differently, but for the most part, that's the makeup. Lead gen, lead source, sales and marketing, account management, fulfillment, ops, and profit. Those are the main buckets. And I'll give you the slice.
You were building
specific numbers.
A holding company with a managed service operating business that's measuring the allocations of those labor and delivery to each asset. Like, did you know you're building a private equity firm in a holdco model?
No, I didn't know it until actually Slices came first, and then that little subsidiary that was working on smaller projects grew so rapidly, I wound up with a second business unit on my hands. And so we found our primary agency was doing all right. The profit was lower, but kind of functioning traditionally. And then we had this new Slices model with this newer version of the agency, and that was growing, almost doubling. It was doubling every year, basically, for 3 or 4 years. So it grew quite quickly, and we needed some back office system to help manage both business units. And so when we set that up, we realized that's about the time when I met you, Peter, and I found, wow, this is a great system for acquisition. So we can acquire a business, take their brand, absorb their team into our production arm, and then take over their back office. There's a lot of efficiencies there. Or if they operate well on their own, we can have them as a separate production arm. They can hold their own brand, and then we can still take over the back office. So lots of different ways we can configure the acquisition, which has been awesome. Kind of fits together.
I want to get into that, but I do want to give you credit. You've been able to give salary increases to people.
Yeah.
Where other agencies get a little challenged at compensating people appropriately to their contribution. Maybe touch on that briefly, because it's a nice benefit beyond what we're going to be talking about in M&A, which I prefer, but it's important to highlight.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite stories. When I first started this model, it was a friend of a friend. We had coffee one day, and he had just left his job as a designer and wanted to start his own firm, and said, James, if I can make $50K doing this on my own, I feel really good about that. He's the son of an immigrant, hard worker, very talented. And in the classic model, we would try to hire him at a normal, quote unquote normal salary. Let's say it's, from 50 to 80K. We would try to bring him on and say, yeah, we're just going to overload you. We're going to give you as much work as you can possibly handle until you're like, please, no more. And we'll try to make you as billable as possible. That was our old model. But in this new Slices model, we showed him the way to play the game. We said, you can earn as many slices as you want. And at first he was doing fulfillment. He did so much fulfillment. He did about 80K worth of fulfillment in his first year. So he did more, almost 50% more or over 50% more his target salary. And then what happened was amazing. He started to learn those other slices. He started to learn the management slices. He started to learn the new business slices. He started to want to take part in the operations and the back office and the leadership. So we gave him some of those slices. And then he was quickly getting to the 120, 140. I think he's consistently at 160-ish in annual rate. And in the past, we would have never had a category for this. You would never, you couldn't start as a 50K employee and jump to 100K, 150K within the first few years. But with this objective system, it's so much easier to do that. In fact, I want him to make 500K because that means he's making the agency, exponentially more than that. So that's that model of thinking about, well, produce more, you'll get paid more, is it's such an easier conversation to have than, hey, I think my rate is worth more now, and it feels arbitrary to give individuals raises. As an agency owner, it always gave me a pit in my stomach to think, all right, well, I have no idea. Can we afford it? It's just coming out of our profit, I guess. Maybe I have to talk to my CFO. It's just kind of a convoluted kind of process.
What every owner wants. They want their team to show up and say, here's the value I can create for the company. Yet there's not been a simple tool, resource available to the team on how to expand their value. And it does rely on the business taking the lead on that. And it's amazing how you've been able to empower people to understand their business contribution in positive ways. And that enabled you to start thinking about it from a consideration, deal structure perspective. So let's talk about that moment in time when you're like, ooh, I know how to slice this up when I do a deal with someone now.
Yeah, like I said, the super interesting part of this structure is that it naturally has all the components of what an agency will typically spend dollars on. 2 or 3 things almost always are nebulous and hidden in the financial organization of their books and numbers and P&L and documents. Owner's compensation, super tricky to try to figure out where that goes, as well as extra expenses that probably are different ways to compensate employees that they should have been compensated with dollars, but they get bonuses or add-ons or perks or other things. And so we can tie those much more closely if we've defined them in slices easier. So I've become quite fast now at looking at a financial document, especially P&L, and being able to carve out, okay, these are, I think, what the slices of that are today. Here's what the slices of it would be if we acquired them. So we would just eliminate this. It goes straight to the bottom line as profit. And then we kind of do that analysis. Hey, is this deal worth it based on our slices? What looks way off to me? Sales and marketing looks ridiculously low. Why is that? It's probably because the owner is doing all the sales and marketing and they're not accounting for that. It shows up in the profit. So let's go ask. Those are the questions that we come back with. Hey, break down your role as an owner for me. How much is sales and marketing by percentage, roughly? 50% is sales and marketing. Okay, well, then that compensation is going to go back to your sales and marketing. Is it still low now? Is it higher? And we're able to do that analysis much more quickly. And I think that gives us a little bit of an edge when we're trying to square up a deal for, whether we should do it or not.
Yeah, it does, James. It really does give you an edge.
Yeah.
Owners wear many hats. And when you're negotiating the sale of a business, the owner's contribution is extremely challenging to measure.
Right.
And unless they have well-documented utilization on their own day-to-day contribution to the business, most of the time that's just one big bucket that's unclear, and it's hard to set an expectation on the go-forward business with that ambiguity. So when a buyer shows up and tries to scrutinize it, the buyer is not always that disciplined. So the fact that you have slices, you operate within this framework, and you're just trying to match and port over what their business looks like in yours is such a fair and equitable way of approaching a company.
Right.
What's the response from other businesses when you start evaluating and scrutinizing these?
I think it all makes sense to them. They go, I see what you're doing here or where this is being pulled out. Sometimes it's hard for them to imagine, well, this is the employee cost that I have. Well, what does that employee do? We care about their role and their activity, not that they, that it's a single person. Great, you found an amazing person who could do 3 or 4 things. Well, let's make sure that we're compensating them properly from the different areas of the business that make the most sense to do that. I have the number one feedback is when we structure a deal, usually they say, hey, you get an A+ for creativity, because we typically structure it as Peter would recommend through an earnout, and we want to do a seller earnout. That's so easy to do in slices because now we already are giving points or percentages from gross to different activities. We'll structure a deal typically with, hey, here's some cash up front. We're going to pay you that as a draw, and we'll set up the earnout as X percentage year one, Y percentage year two, and so on and so forth. And that structure is just a really nice way, a really clean way to do that kind of seller financing through gross percentage, which is basically what House Slices is set up already. So it's been nice for us.
And that's how earnouts work. The major issue is unsophisticated businesses typically don't have the sophistication to manage earnouts. So the only people who get to really leverage it are the ones who have back offices, accounting departments, or do change management to get within the business they bought the metrics required to measure the earnout. So the fact that you show up and we talked about this a little bit, due diligence is you slicing them up.
Right. Yeah. That's something I didn't know, actually, Peter. You're saying that you recommend earnouts as kind of the gold standard. This is the best way to do acquisitions, but the majority of agencies don't have the ability in the back end to be able to do that. They just can't manage that or facilitate that.
If you look at the vast majority of businesses, you want to incentivize the go forward business with performance. So you want buyer and seller aligned. Well, in order for that alignment to be financially prudent or de-risked for the seller, you have to be able to predict those outcomes. Mm-hmm. And so when a seller is interacting with a buyer, they go, okay, well, are you better at managing this business and measuring it than I am? Because measuring this with all the adjustments this is why earnouts get such a negative response, because they just get butchered and administered improperly to the negative financial output of the seller. The fact that you come with here's a conservative and fair approach that we're going to use in a formula, and this is how it works, this is how it worked in the past, and here's how it works for you is very different. Not everybody has full control in that capacity.
That's cool. Yeah. I like hearing that. And also, the sorry if I'm cutting you off here, but the interesting thing is we can even set up the slices in a way that gives them the earnout to their benefit if their projections are true, right? So, very rarely is a buyer going to come along and say, oh, your projections look awesome. Let me give you a value based on that. But our earnout can absolutely get structured so that the percentages are higher. We keep the slices reasonably high towards the end of the earnout and say, well, if your projections are right, your business unit's still going to grow, and we're going to give you a percentage of that. We'll actually wind up giving you more than your valuation, which is, we haven't had a deal come in on that because we'll certainly want to give an upfront lower, and sellers typically don't like that. And so we haven't had anybody say, oh, that's great. Maybe they don't believe in their projections the way that they say that they do in the initial valuation.
Yeah. It's a fair criticism of the marketplace, which is the projections is just a guess. And when you have to guess the future expectations of your business with implications and consequences that go beyond you individually, you're going to be a little bit more in your favor to de-risk it. But in the category of M&A, there's a considerable precedent of acqui-hire earnout over big transaction values. Just because there's a lot more small companies that come together and do things than big companies who get acquired or exit. And in many cases, if you ever want to see it in the marketplace and you don't know what to look for, it's called office expansion. So if you ever say, hey, we're spinning up a new office in a new location, right? You saw this a lot over the last, many 2 decades before. It's harder with digital because things can have been spun up everywhere. But they'd say we opened up a new office and it has 5 clients and 3 people, but they weren't hired. That would be an acqui-hire. Mm-hmm. And so they're trying to do what you've created a system for, which is acquire that book of business and those people and give them pieces of the action as incentives to grow that market. And fundamentally, you just built a better potential way of doing that.
Yeah, I love it.
We have kind of the philosophy of slices. We have a little bit of the pragmatic component parts, what does it look like? You got some like evil
Yep.
genius spreadsheet that works? Do you have technology? Use AI? What's this thing starting to look like?
Yeah, good question. Pragmatically, those slices, components of areas of components of the business have set percentages for ease of just sharing the system. I'll use some just round numbers here. They're a little different when we get down to the nuts and bolts of it, but it's about 15% for sales and marketing. So a portion of that is for the where did the lead source come from? We actually give a portion back to people who refer to us, and if it was our own systems that generated the lead, great, it goes back into the pool to use that funds for the next lead that we need to create. Sales commission, of course, that's 15%. Account management strategy is about 20%. So 10% for account management, 10% for strategy. You may split that up and define that differently, but that's how we organize that. You might have a director of accounts or an account executive and a project manager or account manager working together, but that's the vernacular that we use. 35% for fulfillment, which I think is reasonable. It's about a third of the overall cost of a particular project is going to go to pay the individual to get that work done. I've seen as low as 25%, 20%. Certainly on things like software or much more scalable products, you can get really low, but I think that's reasonable. But companies who have a gross margin of 50, 60, 70%, it's going to be really hard to make money and scale, right? Because it costs you a lot to get the work done. And then the rest is split up into operation and profit, which is somewhere in the 15 to 20% range on both sides, and that just kind of makes up the rounds out the whole as 100%. The beauty of this is that it has to add up to 100, Peter. This is kind of the basic principles of business finance. This is something I only learned about 5 years ago in 15 years of business. So the first 10 years, again, I was heads down doing good work. Hopefully we have money at the end of the day. And I would often spend more than 100%. Often we need to borrow. We would need to, I'm going to give you a raise, sure, but that's going to come from my pocket, or it's going to come from we're not
My
able
slice.
to do. Yeah, it's my slice. And so that mentality, that philosophy, just that alone is really helpful for business owners to think about. Those dollars need to come from something else. If I want that new shiny fancy thing, we're going to have to do less shiny fancy things on this other category, or we have to pay people less, or we have to figure all that out. And so step one, I usually recommend people figure out what their slices are today and match that a little bit to industry standards. I think the numbers that I gave are close. So if you're way off somewhere, like your fulfillment costs, I ran into an agency that were like, oh yeah, I make 30% on this thing. I'm like, you have a 70% cost to do the project? That's high. They're like, no, I make 30% on it. I don't even need to touch that thing. All right, well, how did you sell it? Who manages the thing? Are you okay with cutting out all those things and then trying to get profit at the end? So it usually isn't enough. Anyways, yes, doing it per single project is easy. So if I had a $10,000 project, you can split up all those numbers, associate them in the right places. Where it gets tricky, of course, is that every project, 10K project, is probably made up of several components. We call it a breakdown of that project. You have architecture and strategy and design, development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so you have to kind of break out each of those in slices on their own. And then you have multiple projects, and then you have monthly, you have lots of different people. And so our spreadsheet became very complicated, very complex, and very easy to break. And so we built an Airtable. So spreadsheet was phase one. We built an Airtable around this. So a little bit better database system. We can pull reports much faster. But the obvious conclusion, which is one of the reasons I'm talking to you, Peter, about this, is we're building an app for this. So we call it Slice Master. It's going to be an app that easily gives you the ability to, break down different projects, do financial reporting. And this is the key. This is the real secret sauce. Said here first is it gives your employees a view. There's almost no other system that does that. There's lots of financial management tools, but to give your employee a view of what slices they are earning now, if they are not hitting their slices, or what they need to do in order to hit their slices or exceed their slices and earn more. Maybe a little AI in the future built into it to make recommendations based on those things. How are they doing in their core values, and what kind of bonuses can they get? That element is completely missing, from the arsenal of business software out there, the view to the employee. And so that's kind of the key that we're trying to build the software. So hopefully we'll be rolling that out with a profit share model, like a bonus management tool component of Slices first. And then we'll start to add in some of the other slices as we get going. So that hopefully will roll out in the next 3 to 6 months. So we're going to be taking pilots this year for sure. And then hopefully major rollout the next year or so.
So then fundamentally, because we see it from a buyer's perspective of how it's beneficial, selling. But there was this unique thing that's available to small businesses and service businesses when they don't want to sell to a big strategic, lose their culture, be disrupted. Maybe they're not big enough to be financially incentivized to sell today. There's some sticky things in the business that needs to be resolved for them to sell, or they're aging out. And so there's an ESOP option where your employees could buy the business from you. And this sounds to me completely, because we're setting this up and we discussed this already, this sounds to me like the perfect way to structure an ESOP. Because now the employees, now your team sees all the component parts, therefore can properly administer it and be incentivized for their cut, especially at the next level, which would be ownership level.
Well, Peter, to no surprise to anyone, you're smarter than the average bear. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time. I didn't immediately understand it once I started rolling out Slices for first couple of years. But as I started to meet many of my clients who were going through the arduous process of becoming an ESOP, I realized what you're actually doing is a performance-driven profit share model, which Slices is designed for. And we started looking at becoming our ESOP ourselves and looking into the process. It's ridiculous, the process that you have to go through. You spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal fees to, change your entity type. And certainly there are, tax incentives to do that. But at the end of the day, like you said, this is primarily you develop the ESOP so that you can extract value for the owners, but on behalf of the employees as well. And again, that's what Slices does. And so my big vision, my big dream, we're probably a few years away from this, but my big dream is to roll this out as a mini ESOP tool for small companies who don't have the means to become an ESOP, because you have to have at least $1 million in order to roll an ESOP out. And many companies don't fit that criteria. And so to be able to plug in something like Slices and develop a earnout structure or a slice that is paid to the ownership over a period of time, it is more than possible with a tool like this.
Yeah. And it makes a lot of sense for tying future performance expectations to the people who are the stewards of the business.
Mm-hmm.
And giving them the data points necessary to continue to grow it. Mm-hmm. ESOPs unfortunately have not a bad track record, but just not the most successful track record of continuously growing after the founders have exited. And there's a reason for that. Most founders are entrepreneurial, they're drivers. And when you extract the driver from the business, it has to usually be replaced in succession. And if it's not, just financially motivating people does not create drive. People come with drive and they're rewarded with financial performance. Mm-hmm. And so the neat thing about your model that I appreciate is it helps you identify the people with drive, right? The example you gave of the gentleman who wanted to earn $50,000 a year took initiative to expand his competency of other slices he could take contributions from, and then earned more, goes, that's an individual drive.
That's right.
If that person sticks around and we shift the business around individuals who have demonstrated the expanded contribution of their ambition and their earning potential, the business could continue to grow as well, even without the people who started it originally.
Yeah, that's incredible. I would argue, in addition to that, if for every employee is for them to be able to keep better track of how they're doing, right? So love the book, Great Game of Business, Jack Stack, excellent. Business is a winnable game. You have to teach your employees how to play and how to keep score. They have to know how to do those things. Imagine playing the game and not being able to see the scoreboard regularly. It's impossible, right? So yes, you have to be somewhat open book, at least. Slice Master hopefully is going to give individuals the ability to not only see the scoreboard, but then have all the playbooks ready for them so that they could, have kind of a one-on-one coach, know what to do, not just help themselves, but help their departments, their team, their company grow. So yeah, I think it absolutely could be a game changer for small businesses to implement that. Peter, I would imagine you see this too, that small businesses, I mean, if you have $1 million in EBITDA, you've probably figured out some of the sales aspect, right? You have some of those drivers in place. Or do you see companies that, even big companies that don't have that, they're all tied to the founder?
I own one that was tied to the founder, or more specifically the CEO.
Yeah.
And it was in excess of 3 million of EBITDA, and it didn't have sales figured out.
Wow, really?
What's really interesting is there's a lot of plateauing that happens in service businesses. So as soon as an asset starts to yield a certain output that is acceptable to the ownership, sometimes the drive is diminished. Sometimes the ambition to continue to grow a business from a top line or from an EBITDA expansion perspective is just the return on that effort to disrupt the things that are going well isn't really incentivizing. And so there's a lot of plateauing that happens. And so $1 million of EBITDA alone does not make a good business. A business that achieves a certain threshold of financial performance and then continues that growth over time, that is much better of a business.
So that's interesting. Give me like maybe 2 or 3 factors of that business that's making, if it's $1 million EBITDA, we're talking to 3 million EBITDA, 5 to 10 million, maybe $5 to $12 million in top line revenue.
9 million of revenue, and when we bought it, it was only at 6 million of revenue, 3 million of EBITDA, 55% margin.
Wouldn't you agree?
The advantage of a business like that is when you have good contracts. And I call this positive client concentration. So positive client concentration is when you're able to go really deep and maximize the profitability of a single point of contact.
Sure.
Now that's a risky investment for many. It's not so much for those who understand the industry or the category or the relationships that built the contracts. And I have that, and I have businesses that are in the 40% profit margin that are doing, $2,500 a month, more volume numbers, and they have a great sales process that can predictably generate leads, convert that, and then they die after a certain LTV. So there's different ways to play the game, as we acknowledge Jack Stack. It's whether or not it's what you're building to and what you want out of it. What I love about what you've designed, and again, I sound like I'm a paid sponsor because I'm such a proponent of this because the financial rigor and the measurements there, and I believe in it in so many ways. When you have the discipline to understand the component parts of an asset, you're able to manipulate it and have intervention on it. And therefore you start looking at a business as an asset within a more expanded universe of operation. And all those big words mean you have a holding company model. You actually have created a mechanism to take the founder service-oriented operator and transition them above the business to properly calibrate that business to other external opportunities. Again, that is fundamentally game-changing, life-changing for an entrepreneur who doesn't know that that's a threshold that they can get to.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship, the great game of business, Michael Gerber, we talk about pies and we talk about all these things. At the end of the day, many businesses are just the prisons of jobs for owners.
So
and you free them with what you're building.
Well, first I'm honored, Peter, from you, because I think of you as a brilliant mind in this space. So thank you for that. And of course, as we continue to build it out, your input will forever, have its imprints on some of the systems. So, but what I find is the opposite is true as well. I meet a lot of business owners, a lot of agency owners, especially small ones, who are sick and tired of running the business. They love doing the strategy. They like doing the sales. They don't want to really do anything else. And they're caught having to put out the fires and managing the accounts and doing all the back end administration that they really hate doing in running the business. This isn't what I signed up for. But Slices beautifully takes them out of that component as well, because we can figure out what percentage of their work involves that take that on their behalf. And this has been one of the models that we're running a specific outreach campaign right now to small agencies who don't want to deal with that. Hey, are you tired of running the business and want to just do strategy and sales? You'll wind up spending, this is our pitch to them, you'll wind up spending 80% less time, but wind up making potentially more money because you could double your impact as a salesperson, as a great relationship builder, and as a strategist. Stay on those clients that you like. Let us take the rest. And we've created a model that has a very objective, very clear association to the value that we bring through those back end office, systems. Exactly the way you said it, as a holding company where they don't need to think about it anymore. You think of it as Coca-Cola, right? We just attach another flavor. We'll deliver it the same way that we've been delivering everything else. You like doing the operations, great. Your vitamin water, you can keep doing that part, but you don't want to do any of the back office, great. We'll Coca-Cola company will take care of it. Figmints Mothership will take care of that part. So it's been awesome on both sides.
Success of roll-ups is predicated on finding fragmented industries that are service founder-led and creating a pro-business atmosphere. So when you're a service provider, making money by interacting with the marketplace, when you have to pay attention to the business, you stop making money. And so there's this period of time when you're transitioning to building the business big enough to where you get enough service providers beyond your own one-to-one earning potential of the company. And that's why roll-ups as a structure, as well as the holdco model, works. It's because the people who are these service providers, these creatives, these experts, these strategists, as soon as they start not doing the thing that they're the best in the world at, they stop making as much money. And that's a positive consequence to doing your job well, is growth. And therefore they get pulled out of things. And so when you can build a group or an environment or a holding company that can support them, right, and then you can properly calibrate their contribution to their earnings, you can create a safe environment for their longevity as a business or as a contributor to the business.
100%. I love it. Most business owners struggle or suffer from not having their Roy Disney, not having their integrator, to use the EOS language there, and they get stuck in the classic visionary integrator split within themselves. Most and many visionaries, creative ones especially, they're not very good integrators. But this is fascinating. I had this conversation with an EOS implementer, so they definitely drink the Kool-Aid, and it's revelatory to think about. He said, James, every company has an integrator. Most don't have visionaries. And I thought it was the opposite. I thought most companies have vision, because I'm a visionary, and I just think that most companies are like us or like me. But in reality, visioning is hard. Doing that creative kind of exploratory future thinking is really difficult. I think, franchises, for example, is mostly integrators. And so, yeah, again, the reverse is true in what you're saying, Peter, that they will get burned out in needing to have to express or do that vision thinking when it's not their responsibility, right? And they've kind of rolled into the business as from the integrator side. So, I want to address anybody who's listening around that side of things as well. But both business owners, both business thinkers, and frustrated that they're not able to do all of it, because you can't do all of it all the time.
No, and I'm a big proponent of doing less and less. The less you do, technically, the bigger a business can get.
That is the dream.
So I'm listening to this, and I'm interested in slices, and I want your help. I'm going to harass you and ask for you to help me slice up my business. What's that look like?
Yeah, this is great. So I've just started presenting slices as a methodology to different groups. Got to present at an amazing agency-led, agency-specific conference called Agency Builders, and had some really great feedback there. Ran my first cohort about 6 months ago, and had some really positive feedback. And so learned a lot from that initial cohort. We're about to release the second cohort. So I'd love to get the first 12 to 15 agencies in a room together, work with them one-on-one, do it as an accelerator cohort coaching kind of style. And there's a little bit of video programming. There's a little bit of real tools. Here's the spreadsheet that we've arduously have created over time, and the formulas in it are. I wouldn't suggest that especially if you're a novice in spreadsheets, to try to figure out yourself. But it works for you, and there's some ways to get started there. So that's rolling out first. I'm working on a book. Who knows when that comes out? But hopefully we'll have a manuscript this year, and then start to roll out some more speaking engagements and roll that out over the course of the next 18 months or so. So those are the two. If you would you like some help in just figuring out what your slices are, I'm happy to kind of walk through that with you, send you some materials around that, so you can always reach me and we'll get you started on that. If you're interested in the cohort, happy to help there as well.
And where's the best place to reach out to you?
.com is great because I have an assistant who helps me not miss anything that goes there, and you can find that at figmints.com. Fig like the fruit, mints like the candy, MINTS. Yeah, most of those correspondence will get to me eventually, and so if you just kind of mark I'm interested in slices, that it'll get there.
Perfect, James. I look forward to having you back when you talk about the students who have implemented slices in their M&A, and then ultimately when you slice this up and sell it at some far distant period in the future, of course. So I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you.
So fun. Thanks for having me, Peter. And I can't say this enough. I've learned so much from you and the program. Yeah, love the principles that you're teaching, and anything that I can share with you and your group, I'm happy to do that.
Appreciate it. Thank you, James.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
You're right.